strange experiences, and then putting it all together. James shares a couple of his experiences here today with us, but make sure to watch the full uncut episode after this one. There's way more information. 2 episodes starting here. Check it out.
Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, I know you're an experiencer too. Maybe you can share a little bit about that. You had something happen, and I'm curious, because, there's different people that have things and it affects them in a different way. Some people are shaken, right? Some people are emboldened. And for you, you want to say, hey, I've had these things happen. So you're coming from a perspective with your show that you've got good foundation. Nobody can shake you because you've been through something. Would you be able to share that with us today?
Yeah, I actually feel like, basically, like this is why before I tell you the experience, I feel like I say this on the show sometimes, that I always felt like if this was a game of poker, I'm holding a royal flush and the debunker across me has a 7-8 high at best. Because I always knew that they're wrong and I'm right, and from the get-go. So when you have that in your back pocket, you just know they're not going to win this argument in the end. In the end, you know that you're right.
Right.
But it started for me back in the 70s, in the late 1977. I was almost 9 years old at the time, and I used to share. I lived in a small little town called Mahanoy Plain in Pennsylvania. It's a real small town, and it's also here in Schuylkill County. And we lived in this small house, and my brother Davey and I shared the attic. That's where we were, and he was on one side of the room and I was on the other, and there was a staircase in the middle, splitting it in half, basically. A lot of times we would sleep with the light on, and this night we fell asleep with the light on, reading magazines or whatever. I woke up in the middle of the night with the blanket over my head, and I could hear this humming sound. It was like an electronic humming sound or a buzzing sound. It reminded me of like bees, like a lot of them. Right, and it was unbelievable. I was like, "What's going on here?" And I could tell that somebody was standing right beside the bed, because I could see their shadow through. I had this thin blue blanket, and I could see right through it, and I could see this hand. I could see this arm, this thin arm, and it had only 3 digits on the hand. They were thick at the base, and they came to almost tips or almost points at the tips. And it was moving right above my face and then further away and close to my face and further away. And I'm wondering, what's going on here? And I'm wide awake. I wasn't a dream or sleep paralysis or anything like that. I mean, I was moving around, and I was wide awake all of a sudden. And I feel like I walked into a jackpot somehow in my sleep, and I didn't know what was happening here. And I'm wondering I start trying to communicate with whatever this was. I'm thinking, maybe it was one of my my other younger brother. He would have been too young at the time. He would have only been like 4 or 5 years old, 5 years old, I think. And he was in a different part of the house. And one of my sisters wasn't even born yet, and the other sister was only how old? She would have been like 3, maybe 2 or 3. And so had to be somebody else in the house. And I'm thinking maybe it was my brother Davey, right? And he's just playing around with me, but it wasn't, because there was this sound, and I could see this hand, and I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what was going on, and I started trying to say something. I started saying, "Hello, who's there?" And there was no answer. He just kept on doing this the whole time, right? Mm. And I started getting really upset, and I peeked out of the blanket, but not at the direction of that. I peeked on the other side of the room, and I could see my brother Davey. He was sleeping. He was sound asleep, and his eyes were closed, and he was facing me, and I started yelling to him. And I noticed that when I started yelling to him, that that humming sound or whatever it was like somewhat muffling my voice. And then I got really scared, right? And I started yelling for my mom and dad at the top of my lungs, right? And nobody's coming to the rescue. They're just, the whole time, this thing is just there like this. And I had no idea what was going on. I was too afraid to pull the blanket down. I didn't want to see whatever the face looked like. I could tell that there was a body there connected to this arm, whatever it was, right? But I'm thinking it was a demon from hell. I had no clue at that time about aliens or alien abduction or anything like that. I mean, I was at the time, I was a member of the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy. The church was right across the street from where I lived. And I'm the only idea that came to my mind, this must be either Satan or a demon from hell, because that's the only thing I could drum up. I had no idea. And I'm scared beyond, I can't even begin to tell you how scared I was. And this lasted for 20 minutes. And I started, when nobody's coming to the rescue, My brother Davey wouldn't wake up. Nothing was happening except this thing kept on standing there doing this. And then I start saying my prayers. I was closing my eyes and opened my eyes. The thing was still there. The sound was still there. The sound never let up the entire 20 minutes that this was going on. And then at some point, somehow I conked out, and I don't know how. And I wake up the next day. This was in the late summertime. And in 1977, I wake up the next morning and I'm looking around the room and I was like, oh my God, thank God I survived. I didn't know, I thought I was going to die. I didn't know what was going to happen,
Right.
you know? And my brother Davey was already up and out of the room already. He was gone. And I went down, I started telling my mom what happened, and she didn't believe me, of course. I'm running around the house for like 2 hours trying to tell her, I'm telling you, Mom, there was something in the room last night. I'm explaining this hand, and I'm thinking, you know, I just did a show talking about this again. And I'm thinking what that must have sounded like, you know, it must have sounded, oh, it has to be a dream. She kept on telling me it was a dream. It was a dream, Jimmy. Don't worry about it, you know. And that came to one point where I had like a come to Jesus moment there, where I stopped everything that I was doing, and I remember going up in the attic and just thinking this thing through, and I realized at that moment, after this 2 hours of trying to convince my mom what happened, that no one's ever going to believe you. You're just, for one thing, you're just a kid, and no one's ever going to believe anything you're saying here. I mean, why would they? How could they believe it? I mean, think about what you're saying. Like, I understood this at that moment. But then I remember my dad got home from work. He was a construction worker, and he got home later in the day, like 6 o'clock, and I went running out to the car to tell him. And of course, I got the same old spiel. You know, he told me it's just a dream, and you know, I pretty much just stopped talking about it. Then I didn't know what else to do. I don't want people to think I'm nuts or something, because you know, even though I knew this whatever this was really happened, it scared me so bad. And I even, like, in the years after that, like, I had no idea that it was. I never made a connection to it being possibly non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial, because again, I thought that stuff was just movies, the product of Hollywood, Earth versus the flying saucers, all that kind of stuff out of the 50s. That's what I thought it was. I just thought that was all made up. I didn't realize as a kid, there was no internet back then in the 70s, so you don't know about a lot of different things if you didn't see it on TV, you know, because there was no VCRs or DVRs or anything like that back then. If you didn't see it on TV, then you didn't know about it. And I didn't know anything about this other than these Hollywood movies like War of the Worlds.
Right.
So, you know, time went on after this happened, and I just tried to, you know, it scared, every time I would think about it, it scared me. It always would pop into my head here and there. And I remember trying to convince myself, it must have been a dream. And I would, as the years went by, and I was like, and I would know in the back of my head, you're just lying to yourself, Jim. You know that it really happened, and you know that you were wide awake, and you were, you know, there was no way this was a dream. And then I guess it was around 10, somewhere around 10 years. I don't know exactly. It was somewhere in the late 80s, I believe, 88, 87, 88, 89, something like that, where I was watching shows on TV, a show about UFOs and alien abduction. And that was when I realized, I didn't realize it right away. I remember starting to consider it at that point. And then I thought about it, and I was like, that's what it had to be. I mean, some of what these people are talking about sounds very similar to what happened to me when I was a kid. And that's when I started realizing that's what it was, because I know it was real, and I knew somehow it had, whatever that was going on that night, everybody else in the house was conked out and they weren't awake. I was the only one who, I don't know what happened. Was I abducted? I don't know. I was never hypnotized. I don't know if I want to remember this. I don't know if I want to know what happened. But I know what happened. That was good enough. I don't need to know anymore. I saw it. I know personally, as far as I'm concerned, that was a done deal. There was something in the room. It wasn't human, and now I have this information that other people have experienced the same kind of stuff. That's what must have happened to me.
Yeah.
And you hear stories about the buzzing sound too, like the sound that I heard. You know, there was other people that talk about this. In fact, in the Ariel school incident in 1994, some of the kids said that they heard this buzzing sound and it scared them. And there's so many other cases like this too, where people hear this sound and it sounds like the same thing that I heard. So they realized what it was, right? Then something else happened in the mid-1990s. It was actually 95 or 96. In that case, one of my good friends had called me up. It was like a weekday, Thursday, I believe it was, in August of 1995, 96. I'm not sure exactly. I know it was before. I became a newspaper reporter in late 1996, so I knew it was before that. But anyway, he called me up and he said he had received permission to go fishing on this gated community called Beach Mountain Lakes. It was near Hazleton, Pennsylvania. Somebody, his mom or dad knew I think it was his mom, knew somebody who lived there, and they said it was okay if her son goes fishing there. So my friend Scott called me up and asked me if I wanted to go fishing at this Beach Mountain Lakes. I was like, yeah, okay, night fishing. So he picked me up, and I remember we drove up to Hazleton, and he had his pickup truck, and we went to Walmart. We got bait and snacks and stuff like that, drinks, and then we proceeded to go to this Beach Mountain Lakes. It was a guard at the gate. They let us in. He let us in. He had to sign a paper. And we didn't go fishing on the lake proper. There was a small pond that was off the lake, and that's where he wanted to go fishing. And it was pretty much out of the way. There was nothing else there. It was like, isolated by itself. So we got to this pond around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, and it was dusk, and we started fishing. I remember we were there. It was a hot day. It was a hot evening, and we were there for a while. We were fishing for hours, and we weren't not even a bite, not a nibble, nothing. I remember we weren't catching anything, but we were having a good time anyway. I was just sitting on the shore, every now and then, making a change, and he was doing everything he could to try to catch something, and he wasn't catching anything. And it was around 10 o'clock at night, and I turned around to get a cigarette out of the tackle box, and I saw, like, behind me, there was the pond was in front of me, right? I'm sitting, and to my back, behind me was this open field with this tall grass, and on the perimeter was like a forest. You could see there was trees there. And I could see, when I turned around, I noticed that there was 3 big bright lights moving behind the trees, and they were huge lights. They were like shaped like headlights, but they were like huge. They were big, right? And they were moving like in a line, like they were lined up horizontally, and they were moving behind the trees. And then they came to a clearing, and when it came to that clearing, it started, this thing, whatever it was, started moving toward our position. And that's when I said to my friend Scott, I said, Scott, what the hell is that? And he turned around, and I'll never forget the way he responded. He says, I don't know. The no was like elevated, right? Because here's this big thing as big as a house coming right toward us. And it was only like 2.5 stories off the ground. There was absolutely no sound whatsoever. Nothing. Absolutely nothing, right? And he was actually standing underneath the edge of it. And he grabbed the flashlight. It came it stopped in front of me about 20 feet, right? And it was only 2.5 stories off the ground, and there's these 3 big lights on the front of it. I couldn't make out the shape of it, but he could, because he was standing underneath it with the flashlight. He shined a flashlight on the belly of this thing.
Wow.
And later on, he told me it was circular, right? But right when he shined that flashlight, that's when I got scared. And I thought the thing was going to land, because I thought the thing was going to land right in front of us. I said to Scott, Scott, let's get the hell out of here. And he didn't even question me. We just started throwing the stuff in the back of the pickup truck, and we got in the truck real quick, and we started driving away. And as we're driving away, the thing was starting to move away, and it moved like in a triangular formation, and it was moving basically parallel to the way that it arrived. Like it stopped, it hovered momentarily, and then started moving back in a different direction, back over the trees. And I saw it was very close to the tops of these trees, whatever this thing was, right? And actually, my friend Scott later on told me that he noticed that the tops of the trees were like bending down, like some sort of force was pushing them down. And we were scared out of our minds. We weren't even talking. We're driving out of there. It was frenzied. And we had to stop at one point on this road, this dirt road, because there was at least 20 deer that were running away from the direction where that thing just flew, right? And we're waiting for the deer to get out of there, and then we finally got out of there, and we drove back into Hazleton, and we went to a Dunkin' Donuts. It was a donut shop. I believe it was a Dunkin' Donuts. I remember I got a coffee, and I said to my friend Scott, I was like, Scott, that was a UFO. He's like, I'm not telling anybody. I'm not saying anything, right? I was feeling somewhat the same way, even though I was already talking about this kind of stuff with my friends, including him. He knew that I was interested in this, but now all of a sudden he saw one. Had an experience too, and there was no denying this, right? Both of us saw this.
Hi. So guess what? We now have a High Strange Stories email and a voicemail number for you who have had strange experiences or sightings. Or maybe you just have a burning comment you want to share. I would love to hear from you. So thanks, and let's get back to the show.
There was another experience. I had moved to Hawaii in 2007, and I had something very strange happen there. I don't know how to explain it. I can't explain it. In fact, it involves a dog. Speaking of dogs, there was a dog that I had. I moved to this house. It was in the middle of. Let me pull it back here. I actually moved to the Big Island. I got a job as a reporter. I was living before that. I was working in Iowa. I was a reporter in Iowa for a newspaper there called the Hawkeye. And I was there for 5.5 years. And then I moved to Hawaii in 2007. I couldn't believe I got the job. I was like, wow, Hawaii, I'm definitely going there. This is going to be awesome. Right? It was awesome, I got to say. I was there for a little over 2 years, and then I moved back home. But I was there when I first got there. I rented a room for the first 4 months, and because I needed I needed to get my feet on the ground, figure out what I'm doing here, and anyway, then I got this house. I got this house. I was renting it. It was in this place called Paradise Park in the Big Island, and it was all by itself. Like, there was a lot of other houses there, but they were all far apart, right? And all these houses were built on stilts because it was a tropical rainforest area. So I was there for, I don't know, 3 months maybe. I guess I moved there in February, March, April, May, June. So yeah, so I was there for 2 or 3 months already. This happened in September. And by this point, I already had a dog and 2 cats, but I just got another dog from this guy who I initially was renting the room from. He had pets, and he had a new dog, and he wanted to get rid of it, and he asked me if I wanted it. So I took this dog, and this dog's name was Goldie. It was part Jack Russell Terrier and something else. I don't know what, but it was bigger than your regular Jack Russell Terrier. So the other half must have been, I don't know, something bigger, right? So it was a medium-sized dog. But she was a little bit wild. Like, she was a puppy still, and she was running around. It was hard to keep her under control at the time. Plus, I was working like 10 hours a day, and nobody else was with me at the time. I was just there by myself at this moment. But it was a Saturday, and I was, to cut the grass there, you had to use a weed whacker because it's all lava rock, and you couldn't use a lawnmower. You destroy it in about 5 minutes. So I went out Saturday morning. It was around 11 o'clock in the morning, and I went out to weed whack the house. But I brought the dog out with me because the sound of the weed whacker would make her go crazy and tear the whole house up inside. So I made sure I brought her out with me, and I tied this big long chain. I hooked her up to this big chain. I connected one end of the chain to her collar, and I got the other end, and I tied it around one of the stilts holding up the house in this big loop, and then snapped it in place into the link. And I started cutting the weeds around the house. And the next thing I knew, the dog got away. Like, I saw the dog there. I turned back around. I hit a couple of weeds under the house. There was a couple of weeds growing under the house. And then I turned back around. The dog was gone along with the chain. So I figured the sound of the weed whacker probably freaked her out, and she took off, right? So then I stopped what I was doing, and I started looking all around the house trying to find the dog. And I couldn't find her. And all around the house, around the perimeter, was this really low to the ground vegetation that's really dense, really thick. You couldn't really walk through it. People who are familiar with Hawaii will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm looking in there thinking, well, she couldn't have got too far. The chain's still on her, so she might be around the perimeter here. And I looked all around, could not find her. She was just vanished. Like, she was there and she was gone, like that. So when I went out, there was a dirt road that led up to my house, and that led to another dirt road, and that dirt road led to a highway. And I'm looking on all this dirt road, trying to look for the dog. Couldn't find the dog. I'm looking for her for like an hour. And then I started thinking, what if she ran all the way up to the highway? Because, the highway was a couple of miles away. But you never know, right? I didn't know. And so I stopped what I was doing because there was a kennel nearby. I said, well, maybe I'm thinking to myself, maybe somebody dropped her off at the kennel. So I drove to the kennel, and I asked the guy there, and he said, no dog like you're describing. Nobody brought any dog in. So then I went back to the house, and I started looking around again. I could not find her. Like 2.5 hours went by. And I'm looking around the house, can't find the dog, and I'm again looking in that perimeter area with that thick vegetation. She's not there. And I finally just gave up. She's gone, right? And right when I sat down and I gave up, all of a sudden, right across from me, in this this low to the ground vegetation, she just rises up right in front of me like nothing, and the chain's still connected to her, and she was walking toward me, and she was all calm all of a sudden too, right? This is 2.5 hours that she was missing, and I wouldn't have thought anything of this, right? However, the other end of the chain was still connected to her, and the other end of the chain was still in that loop. And I couldn't figure that out. I couldn't understand, like, how is that possible? How's that? There's nobody there. This is broad daylight. If somebody else would have been there, I would have known it, right? Mm-hmm. There's no other person there. And all of a sudden, this dog returns to me like this under strange circumstances from a place I just looked at. And not only that, but the chain's still connected to her. But the biggest mystery to me was that it was still in that loop on the other end where I had wrapped it around the stilt holding the house up. So I'm thinking to myself, is there a space there somewhere where the loop went through? So I'm examining the stilt of the house. There's nothing. I mean, of course, it was holding the house up. How could there be a space? But I had to look anyway, And then I was thinking to myself, well, maybe it was somewhere else I connected this. And I looked at every other possibility, and there was no place that I could have hooked it up to where she could have got away like that and keep the loop intact. Like, you would have thought that the loop would have been busted open. That's what I thought would have been that would have been, then I would have never even thought twice about it. But unfortunately for me, the loop wasn't busted open. It was still intact, and it didn't make any sense to me. And I couldn't figure this out. And till this day, I can't figure it out. And I don't know what happened here. And I've read some stories where sometimes dogs are abducted. Not just people, but I've come across some stories where dogs are taken, and who knows? Maybe that's what happened at that time, at that moment, because I can't figure this out to this day. It troubled me for so much. I remember for a couple of weeks after that, every day after I'd get home from work, and I'd go over it again, trying to figure this mystery out. I never was able to figure it out. And I remember around that time, I had just heard stories about ghosts in Hawaii on the Big Island called night marchers, and I was thinking, well, maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was ghosts or something. But even though I really didn't know about it, I don't know if I really believe in ghosts or not. I mean, I don't know, have that kind of evidence. But I couldn't figure it out. And then as a few more years went by, and I remember reading about Skinwalker Ranch and the poltergeist activity that was ongoing there with that family that lived there in the 90s. And then I was thinking, that's probably it probably was the aliens again. Probably the same ones that were coming to check me out back in the 70s, and the ones I saw at Beach Mountain Lakes in the 90s. I mean, I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. I have no explanation for it. Whether it's connected or not, I can't say. I don't know.
That's bizarre, man. Bizarre.
There's no...
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.
Hi, we need your help to get bigger and better. How? Just like, comment, and subscribe. It's free, and it only takes a few seconds. So thank you, and remember, there's a lot of strange and unexpected in our reality, so always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open, and stay safe. See you next time.